Welcome to part 2 of a ham-fisted analysis of Dracula 2020 Netflix style. So, part 1 of this series, as I'm sure you're aware, was released in early April. I'm recording part 2 in early November, because as I'm sure you all know, 2020 has been a little bit crazed. So, thank you so much for bearing with me, and I hope you enjoy part 2. Action! Welcome to a ham-fisted analysis of Dracula, part 2, Blood Vessel. So, I got pretty belligerent by the end of the last one, and I will probably be at a similar level throughout this one. Be warned. Scene 1. Where the hell are we? We're in Dracula's mind palace, I guess. It's there's a chandelier, and it's like a cave, and it's a part of the castle that we've never seen. It's designed to look like the castle, but also is vague enough that, spoiler alert, it's in Dracula's Sherlock Holmesian style mind palace. And don't worry, we'll get back to the Sherlock comparisons because they are perpetual. Literally the first line of episode 2 is, "I can't bear a bad book. Can you? It's a commitment, a contract between an author and a reader, and I have to be engaged at once." We're in episode 2. It's the first line, and Stephen Moffat is already back on his bullshit about how he's smarter than you. Stephen, the episode just started. We've had one introductory shot of a chandelier. Please give me more than 3 seconds before you tell me that you're smarter than me. I promise, I get it, you are. But Stephen, please, I'm so tired. So the scene continues, and we have some witty banter between Dracula and Van Helsing, and then a few lines later, Van Helsing asks, "Why are we talking about stories?" Because it's a framing device, Van Helsing, and it obviously it's clear that this is a framing device, but the story's called Blood Vessel. We know that it takes place on a boat, and we only have this sort of framing device, this mind palace, chess, wine drinking, snarky little debate between these two people. I suppose it's a little charitable to call Dracula a person, but whatever. Because it is Stephen Moffat's way of explaining to you how much smarter he is than the source material as the source material is expounded upon. This episode is the most faithful to the original material, while also having a color commentary by Stephen Moffat for the first half through this framing device. Literally every so often it cuts back to the Mind Palace, and Dracula and Van Helsing can literally have a cutesy little conversation where they crack jokes about what you just watched. It's Mystery Science Theater 3000, except that everyone involved is an insufferable know-it-all. They do their stupid little game, and one of the first lines, they come over to the table and they've already got a game set up. A chess game is already in progress, which, I get it. It's not a complicated metaphor, it's just an obnoxious one, and Agatha literally says to Dracula, "A knight is menacing a queen," which, yes, he's a knight. He's a member of the Order Dracula. Very good. You did it, Steve. You did it. He's a knight, and she's a queen because #girlboss slay. Anyway, let's press on. So there's something that needs to be said pretty much off the bat in the first scene, which is, yes, even the original Dracula, Bram Stoker's Dracula, the one from the 1890s, is schlocky, it's overperformed. It is ham-fisted, it is downright telenovela-esque. It is truly soap opera Twin Peaks Season 1 madness. That being said, you kind of have to lean into it if you want to do that, And this is so glossy, it's so well produced, it clearly has a high budget, and that clashes really poorly with the sort of schlocky one-liners that these characters rattle off. Like, a knight is menacing a queen? Yeah, I get it. That would be really funny if this were a what we do in the shadows sort of schlock thing. But once again, we have already, again, we're in scene 1. We are in scene 1, and we have encountered the problem that has plagued us since scene 1 of the last show. Although, in episode 1, actually, it was a little more tonally consistent, which is that the production value and the sort of schlock factor this show doesn't know what it wants to be. It's torn between those two factors and suffers greatly for it. This scene specifically, and the show as a whole, they want to take themselves really seriously. They want to sort of be both things. This show wants to be schlocky and sort of horror-esque and make homage to Dracula's long sort of pulpy history, while at the same time being genuinely well-produced and scary, a sort of modern horror picture. And the issue is that those two things clash, and Steven did a really poor job of cut and pasting. This show sort of gear shifts very rapidly between horror and comedy and murder mystery. Especially this episode has a lot of really heavy murder mystery elements, and it doesn't mesh well with the sort of horror elements, which in turn clash with the quippier side of the murder mystery. So all in all, it's messy and confusing. Not to mention that now I have to bring up some anime. It is with a heavy heart that I must introduce JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. JoJo's Bizarre Adventure is an 80s loving homoerotic punch-em-up anime, and it does have quite a few vampires in seasons 1 and 2, and then in season 3 it promptly moves on, and there's souls, you astral project your soul and it beats the shit out of people. Unimportant. It draws rather heavily, as one will when doing an anime about vampires, on vampire lore and vampire tropes. And not just that, but Stephen Moffat's Dracula 2020 draws rather heavily from some of the tropes, be it accident or otherwise, that are utilized in the first 2 seasons of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. And in Blood Vessel, 2 of 3, is where the JoJoning of Stephen Moffat's Dracula begins. There's a character in seasons 1 and 2 of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure named Robert E.O. Speedwagon, and his function is to briefly fight the first JoJo, unimportant as to why there's multiple, with a knife that is also a hat, and then he loses, and then he becomes JoJo's toady for the rest of his natural life. And his narrative function is to scream in horror and explain to the audience in mind-numbing detail the minutiae of the fantasy martial arts that the characters practice. So essentially, whenever there's a fight, he narrates what's happening, so the audience can understand. So the Mind Palace banter between Van Helsing and Dracula serves the same function, to sort of provide a director's commentary on what's going on. And we saw a bit of this in episode 1, where Van Helsing and Dracula have the long-winded debate on the extent of Dracula's powers. That is literally to cue the audience in on the mechanics of the universe. And, a good writer would have it explored as we see it happening, instead of the characters literally talking about it where nothing is going on, which generally a good writer would have to, you could literally just show you the limits of their powers instead of having somebody explaining the limits of their powers as they demonstrate their powers. But Steven takes it one step further and has characters discuss their powers without actually utilizing them at all, and so it just turns into a weird, horny conversation at the gate of a convent. Now, Van Helsing, in this episode, performs that function, at least for the first half of the episode. She literally explains to us what just happened. Not while it's happening. No. A scene will conclude. We will be shown something, and then we will immediately be told what just occurred mere seconds after it happened. And I will, from here on out, refer to this as speedwagoning. So Van Helsing then asks, they keep talking, but then Van Helsing asks Dracula, "So, after you left the convent, what then?" And this is what is so damn jarring about this episode, which, in order to maintain the sanctity of the framing device, of course it needs to be jarring, because we can't say how Van Helsing got where she is, or else we would ruin the twist. But that being said, the twist is stupid, and so we're sort of jarred with this, wait, what the hell? Where is she? Last time we were at the convent, and now we just smash cut to her in this Dracula mind palace? What's happening? Dracula then has a quote, and it's the intro quote, where we smash cut out of the mind palace and into the actual episode. We haven't started the episode yet. We're still in the mind palace. Dracula says, "It's a long and complex story. At sea, one meets an interesting range of characters, and I would advise you not to get too attached to any of them." Which, frankly, that's awesome. That's like if you had a narrator at the beginning of sort of a schlocky horror film say that line, it would work beautifully. But because it's Dracula in his mind palace, it's fucky, Steven. It's fucky. And why, Colin, you might ask, is it fucky? And quite frankly, it's messed up because we've already established that now Dracula is so intelligent that he is serving the same narrative function as a narrator. Dracula, which, of course, he does. Like, spoiler alert, Dracula has meticulously contrived the entire plot of this episode to unfold like, I don't know, to roll out before him like a red carpet. But that being said, this Dracula is so smart, so Sherlock Holmesian in his intellect, that he has constructed this whole plot and is essentially the god of the universe in which he operates in episode 2. Or at least in this stage in episode 2, he is the narrator here, and it really sort of serves to deify this version of Dracula, which again, I think goes to defeat this sort of function of him as the protagonist. Because if he's too powerful, then we don't have adequate conflict for our protagonist. Steven? Smash cut to the intro. We get the intro, and boy, what an intro it is. So, it's like the Hannibal intro from NBC. It's so glossy and well prepared. And Hannibal is glossy. It's beautifully shot. Its characters are refined, the acting is impeccable, it's witty, and it's very, very serious. It can be funny, but the tone is extremely consistent. It makes internal sense. And there's the intro lacks a lot of the schlock that is represented in this Dracula show. And so, again, the tonal inconsistency, we've got a very serious, glossy, sort of sexy intro, and then a show that doesn't know what to be. So again, it's a hand on the scale, kind of. So in the interest of brevity, because we've got a series of cast members that just sort of show up, We've got a series of cast members, and they board the Demeter, or the Demeter, it's literally the name of the ship that Dracula booze cruises into England on. We're getting straight references from out of the book now. So we get a series of people who are introduced to us as they enter the Demeter, with some exceptions. So, cast in order of appearance, according to my notes, which could be wrong. Yuri Sokolov, the captain. He also has a friend who's a one-handed cook, whose name is Olgaren. So, the first scene we see with Yuri Sokolov is he's laying in bed, and he has this horrifying nightmare where it's an excellent horror sequence where the severed hand, it's this rotting severed hand, and it's crawling towards him, and then the one-handed cook, Olgaren, bursts in the door and asks in Russian, "Have you seen my hand, Captain?" as the hand, crawls toward him, and it's awesome, dude. It's really cool. Next, we have Dr. Sharma. So this episode has a really large and interesting cast, and Dracula has already told us that everyone is going to die. So, again, we're undercutting our own stakes a little bit for the sake of sizzle. Get it? And it's not a huge issue, because out of all of the episodes, this one actually has the most concrete horror elements, episode 3 being the worst. But the framing device is weird, and it's not effective, and the point of view jumps around, quite frankly, a lot, because we have Dracula and Agatha, and then we have Yuri, and then we have Dr. Sharma, and then we have Pyotr, and we'll get to Pyotr, but basically, we have this jumping point of view cam that essentially introduces us to three important characters before they get on the ship, which I think is a bit of a mistake. I think if you're going to do the framing device, you have to start with everybody getting on the ship, and then you introduce everyone, and then you get into their backstory, because if you introduce everybody out of order, if you give people intro sequences before they're even on the boat, we know who's gonna die. Which, you know, I guess is fine. I guess it's fine. There are pros and cons to every way that you could order this. So, there are fancy name cards, which is in, I believe, Dracula's handwriting, which would have been a cool detail if we didn't have the framing device, but it's not important. So, Dr. Sharma, the first scene we see him, because we had Yuri's dream sequence, and then we have Dr. Sharma's sequence, and workers carry in this coffin that people have been complaining about. People have been hearing weeping, presumably from inside. Upon opening the coffin, and the shot is really cool, the camera pulls away, and the audience never sees the inside of the coffin, only allowing us to see the scratch marks on the lid, and to hear Sharma talk about how the person inside may be a zombie. Now, with the benefit of Jonathan Harker's experience, the audience gets a really nice sense of dramatic irony. We know that there is probably a Zamboni in that coffin that will spring out at a dramatically appropriate time. But the scene is just long enough that we have time to flash back to the horror in Dracula's dungeon with the contorting bodies, and the tension builds. And Sharma even does us the courtesy of pointing out to one of the workmen, looking almost directly into the camera, that the coffin is 70 years old. It's literally the workmen being an audience proxy. Here, Moffat includes, and incorporates the audience by giving them the proxy of the workmen for Sharma to explain the horror to. Now, I would say that this is telling rather than showing, but since we've already seen the horror of the sort of crawling, screaming zombies, it's less of telling and more of reminding. And this is why I actually think that this is the best episode of the three. It's little things like this. It's like they decided, let's make this one the horror episode, and we'll do all the horror stuff, and we'll commit to being a horror at like a 7 out of 10. And they did. And it's pretty good a lot of the time. And then, of course, you know, at a dramatically appropriate moment, the zombie does sit up, and we get a very cool B-movie shot where the three men, Sharma and the two laborers, all turn toward the camera in unison, looking nervous, while the strings squeal and the brass section swells, and the camera zooms in on the rotting face of the zombie, which then gives a very satisfying... Again, it's too easy. It's too easy. 3. Pyotr. We open on a corpse, and the title card tells us that this is Pyotr. His mother is crying over his body, but we're in a hospital, and there's an Eastern Orthodox priest with her. A young man, the protagonist, is swabbing the floor. The priest mentions that Pyotr had landed a job aboard a ship, and we all know that this is the Demeter, and that the boy nearly spills his water bucket with the mop. The priest shoots him a dark look. The priest then forces Pyotr's mother to hammer a stake through the corpse's heart, while the young man sits outside and listens to the howls of the undead. Smash cut to the Demeter, and we see the captain's log laid open, with sailors signing their names in it. This is the scene where everybody gets on the boat. The young man says that his name is Pyotr, and the captain welcomes him aboard. Olgaren slams his prosthetic down on the ship's log and signs it. The captain says to him, "I'll try to get you back in one piece this time." The sailor replies, "How many times? No one blamed you for what happened. And what do I need 2 hands for?" Gesturing with his 2-pronged fork, he says, "This is better for stirring soup." Except, you know, it's in Russian, but I just have fun doing the accent, because it's fun. Okay, time for analysis. We all know that our young man lied to get onto the Demeter. Why? Mystery. It deepens character. It lets us know that he's brave and independent. The captain's nightmares reveal that not only is he haunted by his guilt over the accident that claimed the cook's hand, but they may be semi-prophetic. As far as the cook is concerned, Olgaren, he has forgiven the captain for the loss of his hand, and seems like a pretty chill guy. So now we know 3 people. This was done, in the case of the captain and the cook, really pretty economically, as far as time spent. The camera pans up from here keeping the captain's log in frame to reveal Adisa, who announces Lord and Lady Ruthven. Adisa is the servant and the only black man we've seen in the show so far. He's smart, he's a rationalist, and he's a non-believer. And he does not suffer fools. He's one of the characters that I really like, him and Sharma, mostly, that Steve just really fucks on, as far as the plot is concerned. He just deals them a shit hand. And geez, I love how much importance is put on framing this book, because in Bram Stoker's Dracula, in the novel, the captain's log is one of the only items to survive the voyage of the Demeter, the other being the captain's body, his hands lashed to the wheel with the beads of his crucifix. Note the reference with the cook's severed hands. Not that the captain's hands in Dracula were removed, of course, but they were cut to the bone by the cord of the rosary. You get the idea. Lady R, Riven, from League of Legends, says to the captain, "We just got married, isn't it wonderful?" And Lord R says, "Make it a long voyage, eh, Captain?" And then winks at the old sea dog before strutting away with a decidedly sensual wink. Nathan Stewart Jarrett, who plays Adisa, who is Lordy and Lady's manservant, does a really excellent job of looking awkward and pissed off through the entire exchange. I didn't catch it the first time, but it is very good. He then reinforces that feeling with the line, "Oh, it will be." Adisa swats at a small swarm of flies. Okay, after this introduction, we know that the couple is horny and that Adisa is mad about it. Or so it seems. The seeds of mystery are planted everywhere, and Dracula, as is confirmed by the flies, is aboard. This is really a pretty strong opening. Is there some heavy-handed exposition? Yes. Is it tropey? Absolutely. But it's faithful enough to honor tropes while threading the needle of not being too obtuse. Which, for example, we would say that using chess as a symbol for mind games we would call that obtuse. So, there has been a choice made here to deviate from the book, and in the novel, or in Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula, which I must say is not faithful 100% to the book, but is one of the more faithful adaptations, and both the book and Bram Stoker's Dracula include the Demeter, and the ship is hauling cargo, boxes and boxes of earth. It's grave dirt required for Dracula's regeneration. So Moffat has chosen to make this miniature horror scene, this sort of Murder on the Orient Express, where a bunch of strangers are gathered in one place. It doesn't really have a ton of bearing on either the first or third sections of the story, both of which are pretty clearly delineated by either time or distance. It feels like filler, which is annoying, because the execution without parts 1 and 3 wouldn't be awful as a standalone. If this were the series and we just got rid of everything else, and we got to know this cast, it would probably be pretty goddamn good. Once again, as I will say hundreds of times, it is a problem of commitment. The series doesn't know what it wants to be, and in this installment, because the sea voyage is so walled off by the other parts of the story, the creators felt safe enough to dial up the horror elements and have a little fun. The in-canon reason for Dracula's doing this, because it's all him, it's always all Dracula, nothing happens without Dracula being some way involved, it's stupid, his reason, but we'll get there. This Murder on the Orient Express, but with a vampire, is actually a great idea, and I wish that the creators committed to it. I mean, I'm sure it's an intentional reference. There's even some character overlap, including deposed Eastern European nobles, for one. And this isn't a bad thing. There are some really excellent character building moments. For example, we see Pyotr, as he's calling himself, gag on the grog that he's drinking with the other sailors. And we even get Valentin, the ominous old sea dog trademark, whispering to him,
"Oh, look at this one. You are as green as your face. You're probably thinking this all looks very strange and frightening."
And Pyotr, "Yes, sir." Ominous old sea dog TMCR.
"I agree."
Immediately followed by a shot of Dracula's casket and a peasant lady crossing herself. We haven't left the harbor yet at this point. And again, this is so campy in that thoroughly, 19th century sort of faithful way that I can't be mad at it. It's spooky. It's not scary, but it's spooky. We have sort of characters having fun about being scared. And that is something, this show isn't fun. That's one of the traits that this gloss kind of gives off to this show, is that this show doesn't acknowledge how fun it could be and how much fun it has at times. And when it tries to have fun, because everything else is so glossy and serious, it comes off as tonally dissonant. Okay, back on track. We overhear this conversation as Dr. Sharma boards the ship with his daughter, Yamini. As Sharma and Yamini board the ship, we overhear this conversation between two sailors.
How many passengers? 7. Cargo? Saltpeter, children's dolls, sulfur, soil, charcoal.
Again, this is great. I wish this was the whole show, because this is seeding. This is seeding because the contents of the ship's hold will come back later, and those of you who are chemistry nerds already know why. We already know that everyone on board is dead, and so the growing dread is now only reinforced by the fact that Sharma is bringing his maybe 10-year-old daughter along. Horrifying. Also, Sharma has this new cool facial scar from his Zamboni encounter. Further, what an evocative list of things. Like, are you serious? It's a cool list. Not to mention, of course, that when our old deposed Eastern European noblewoman gets on the ship, ominous old sea dog TMCR has, the go-to Pirates of the Caribbean line,
"Bad luck to have a woman on board."
You can't have a spooky sea adventure without at least one sexist, right? It's great. It's great. And the captain looks kind of bemusedly at Olgaren, the cook, who just kind of shrugs. Again, not the worst. It acknowledges the silliness of this old seaman, but it allows for a sort of nudge to the audience. You've seen Pirates of the Caribbean. You know about this. So this scene is a reflection in a lot of ways of the racism scene that happens a little bit later, but I think this scene is a little less galling because it doesn't completely just stop the plot in its tracks. The sexist sailor trope is already established. It's an established media shorthand that Stephen is using to communicate tone. Now, that is not to say that it is harmless. It is far from harmless. But it still moves the story forward, and so it's in more of a gray area than the scene we get later. Could Stephen have used a different shorthand here? Yes. Let's move on. And of course, there's one person who's unaccounted for. I don't know which sailor it is. It might be the bosun. It doesn't matter. We see him a few more times and then he dies or fucks off. But he turns to the captain. The captain asks, "All aboard?" And he goes, "No, sir. There is one missing. A count." And then fucking Dracula whips around in a long cape with a top hat on, and he goes, "Count Dracula," and then smiles shit-eatingly, which is a hilarious thing to happen. Very funny, very campy, very good. And then immediately is ruined by Agatha Van Helsing asking, "What?" And then we smash cut back to the Mind Palace, where we then have more cognitive debate bullshit. Van Helsing literally asks him, "You were traveling openly with the passengers?" To which Dracula replies, "It's 4 weeks to England. What do you expect me to do? Lie around in a box?" Which, again, you're smarter than the source material, Steve. You did it. You're a big smart boy with a 400 IQ galaxy brain. Moving on. And, frankly, if Agatha Van Helsing wasn't in the first half of this show, or we even scaled back the Mind Palace nonsense, I think we would see a marked improvement. Alright, my moments of hilarious camp keep getting ruined by Stephen Moffat. Let's press on. So, of course, they're all staying in rooms inside, and we get an establishing shot of number 9, door number 9, and there's a spooky zoom on door number 9. So, moving on. We have a character growth moment between Pyotr and Olgaren, when they're joking, and they develop an inside joke because Olgarin is this big, gruff guy, and Pyotr is this tiny, easily bullyable twink. And, so they kind of have this, they have this little rapport going. And it's really sweet to see this big, gruff sailor sort of adopt this little shy, obviously traumatized boy, and they develop this little inside joke where, Pyotr says, needs more paprika, and then this hulking, one-armed man is like, oh, it's charming. It's very nice. It's very sweet. So, smash cut. We're at dinner. There's like a little dining car in the train, and they're all, eating food and drinking wine and chatting it up at little round tables lit by candlelight. It's cute. It's great. And there's a little conversation between Lord Ruthven and Adisa, and Dorabella Ruthven passed out in her room. And it's implied by Lord Horny that she is asleep because Lord Ruthven frankly fucks so good. At this, Adisa becomes agitated, and the two of them have a little conversation where Ruthven says, "This marriage is a necessary evil. You know that." And then Adisa replies, "Don't call me your man. It hurts." With tears in his eyes, and very obviously, oh, shit, it's gay. Awesome, okay. All right, Steve, I can roll with this. Moving forward. Dracula enters the dining room with a medallion on in full Bela Lugosi mode, which is very silly, but in kind of a winky, naughty way, so I'll let it slide. That being said, what's silly in a way that I won't let it slide is that Dracula starts flirting with this old noblewoman, and it is revealed that she's in fact Austrian, I believe, and Dracula is rusty on his German, so he goes, "Excuse me," and he leaves, and then he goes and sucks a German sailor, and then he comes back and he's fluent in German, which, Stephen, I think this is an opinion that I share, but semantic use of a hard magic system makes that system annoying. Because semantic use of any magic dilutes the power, the evocativeness of that magic. As Dael Kingsmill says in her videos, magic should be vague and evocative. And you know it ain't vague and evocative? Slurping down a German to learn fucking German. And of course Van Helsing calls him on this, but it's still dumb if a character references it. You can't just be meta and then be, fine. It's still stupid. Agatha literally points out that the man that Dracula killed was the helmsman. He was the guy steering the ship, which, as she says, "Do you have no self-control?" Which, yes, Stephen, very good. But also, oh my god! Dracula is supposed to be an idiot, He's kind of an idiot in the book. And this is, in character for him. But even so. Also, all of the conversations between Dracula and Van Helsing take place over their chess game. And there is literally, when the camera zooms in, Van Helsing makes a move, and the camera zooms in on the chess game with a fucking whoosh, and it's deeply stupid. The rest of the scene with the old Duchess proceeds the way that you think it will. And is that necessarily a bad thing? I would argue not really. It's well done, and it's evocative, it's dramatic, the music swells at the appropriate moments, and it ends with a ferocious, neck-biting, dancing love scene. It's every standard vampire movie. It's original enough that I haven't seen it before, whether it's stolen from something that I haven't seen, or whether Stephen Moffat thought of it himself, I couldn't tell you. But it's original enough that I haven't seen it before, and it's emotionally gripping. And ultimately, that's what counts. We're back at the Mind Palace! And when asked by Van Helsing if the ability to summon fog is useful in blocking out the sun, Dracula replies, "You know what they say? Always take the weather with you." Which I googled, because it seems like a colloquialism. And it is, in fact, but it's a song from 1991 by the Australian band Crowded House. And all references to that phrase that I can find are, in fact, references to the Crowded House song. So does Dracula listen to a lot of Australian rock? It's also a 2006 Jimmy Buffett album. And am I being the asshole here? Yes. But that line is written to be significant enough that it should have some bearing on an English-speaking audience. It's written with that weight. According to some wordreference.com posts, it's an idiom in the UK, which yeah. But as far as we know, Dracula has never been to the UK. Excelsior, onward and upward. So there's a great gag where Dracula really spooks Pyotr because they're searching the ship for who's murdering people, and Dracula reaches his hand into a barrel of rum, and, he pretends to be injured, and there's big shock, and he really spooks Pyotr. And it's really good because it, again, plays into the characterization of funny Dracula, which I don't love, but if you're going to commit to it, Stephen commits to it. So I can't fault him there. But it also seeds the concept that we have a whole lot of rum on board. Which, of course you would. It's a ship in the 1890s. And grog is essentially the only way that sailors have of not getting scurvy. But we have rum on board. Also, Dracula's wearing these badass little John Lennon glasses, and fully insinuates that he killed the real Pyotr. But he does this on top of everything else. This show moves at 1,000 miles an hour, but also every line is either seeding something that will come in later, or is so mind-numbingly stupid that I have to make a comment on it. And the ones that aren't those things are actually kind of good, and so I feel like I have to make a comment on it anyway. So this video is going to be 1,000,000 years long, and I'm going to lose my fucking mind. We also have a growing friendship between Pyotr and the one-handed cook, and because their relationship was, at the beginning, adversarial, it's really lovely to see this growing friendship. Again, this is proof that Stephen Moffat is a competent writer when he wants to be. Is it formulaic? Yes. Has it been done 1,000 times before? Yes. But is it different enough in this specific iteration that I care about these people? I don't give a fuck about snarky Dracula. He's a weird pain in the ass, and I don't like seeing him on screen almost as much as I don't like Agatha Van Helsing being on screen, and it's not because I dislike the character of Agatha Van Helsing, and especially not that I disapprove of her being a woman. Frankly, I don't care, and I think that's an important point to make because you do get a lot of sexists out here. 2020 is a cursed time. I dislike it because whenever Agatha Van Helsing is on screen is when Stephen Moffat's writing is at its most Stephen Moffat. So I don't so much dislike Agatha Van Helsing as I dislike what the author is doing whenever she's in the story. My next point is just the phrase, written in all caps, perform heterosexuality. And that's in reference to Lord Ruthven, or Ruthven, or Ricketts, whatever. Ruthven is explaining why Dorabella is not out and about with the crew. And my impression of Reuven is not very good, but he says, Dorabella is, how shall I put it? She's quite exhausted, poor thing. Which is sickening to everyone involved. Everyone is just disgusted, except for Dracula and Reuven, who are just horny together for a while. They're just really loving it. Dracula makes this whole point about what a good name Dorabella is and how it lingers on the tongue. And frankly, does this have a place? Yeah, sure, it's horny enough, why not? But oh my god, dude, that sort of overtly, it is almost clownish horniness is, it's funny in like Lupin the Third, because that's a meme. It's anime horniness. This is anime horniness, which actually is pretty much in line with Bram Stoker's Dracula and most late 19th century literature being essentially that time period's equivalent of anime. However, it's very weird to see a real person be that horny. I don't like it. I don't like it at all. Let's move on. We see Dr. Sharma having a PTSD attack, where he is sitting sweatily at his chair, and then we get flashbacks to the zombie attack, and, we see the violence, and we see the zombie murdering the guys that he was hanging out with, And then he looks over to his daughter's bed where she is asleep, and the sort of lilting strings kick in, and it is essentially a film shorthand of saying that his daughter is the most important thing on Earth to him, so much so that he would risk the undead to protect her. This is a very efficient way of saying this, and in my notes, I talk about how the zombie attack is superfluous, but I really don't know if that's true. I think it would be interesting to just see him, the actor, having PTSD, having like an anxiety attack, because I fully think that Sacha Dhawan, the actor, that is 100% within his range. He is a very good actor, and he performs this role beautifully, and I think it might be an interesting experiment to just let the scene play out and not intercut the zombie horror, because I'm sure that if we saw him having a horrible, anxiety flashback, that we would imagine the zombie horror. But I am not a filmmaker. Next point. So naturally we get a Dracula Dorabella scene, because Dorabella has been hiding below decks all the time, because, of course, Dracula's been feeding on her and she has become sensitive to sunlight. Or at least that's my fan theory. So anyway, it's real horny. It is about as horny as you'd expect, although less horny, I do believe, than the scene between Dracula and her husband, which we'll get to. So, they're flirting, blah, blah, blah. Things are getting a little tense, a little hot and heavy, and then we see blood. It's a smash cut to the sleeping Yamini, and we see blood drip from between the boards of the ship that serve as the ceiling of her berth. We see the blood drip onto her face. Skipping ahead, because if we don't, we're going to be here all day. The search for the murderer begins! People are disappearing right, left, and center, and we have to search all the rooms. But number 9 is forbidden. It hasn't been opened, and Captain Sokolov is under specific orders not to open it. And then Dracula tells him to open it, and so Sokolov with the other sailors goes into number 9. But only he goes in by himself, and we don't see what is in the sealed chamber. This story is, of course, accompanied by more redundant Mind Palace nonsense, and then we blessedly move on. She literally says, "I assumed number 9 was your cabin." And it's like, yeah, so did we, Steve. That's the whole idea. That's the whole idea here. You're smarter than me. I get it. You're a big, fancy British writerman, and I'm an idiot. I'm a dumb man. Are you happy, Stephen? And then we get to move on directly to racism. Do not pass go. Do not collect 200. It wouldn't be the 1890s without racism, Steve. I get it. The 1890s was a bad time. But Moffat isn't trying to say anything with this other than sailor ignorant and Adisa has a sharp tongue. There's not really a moral other than racism bad, which, if you didn't already know that, I don't want to talk to you. And it doesn't advance the story. It just reinforces that the sailor is racist and that Adisa is quick-witted and prickly.
And the show actually already addresses the racism in Adisa's story, without this scene, because Adisa has to pretend to be a manservant. We've established this. He can't be out with his partner because of not only his sexuality, but because of the racism of the people around him. Not only is this scene lazy, but it's superfluous. And that's just my take, though. I'm a dumb guy, so grain of salt, of course. But I think that we've already established this pretty clearly through subtext. And so not only is Steven stopping the plot to tell you that he thinks racism is bad, which is the bare minimum, but also he's stopping to tell you something that you already know.
Okay, so a sailor falls out of the rigging, and he breaks his leg, and there's blood, and we establish through Mind Palace VO that Dracula turns into a slavering maniac around blood because he's addicted to it. He can't stand the sight of blood. And after Van Helsing introduces this concept, Dracula replies, it's so nice to be understood. Van Helsing says, "Not completely. 7 very different passengers on the Demeter. How convenient, given your dietary requirements." Do you get it? Stephen has now explained it to you. The Speedwagon principle has played out. And if you haven't gotten it, don't you worry. Stephen will explain it to you again. So they try to affix a splint to the injured sailor, and again, this show's competent horror elements come out. The tonal shifts give me whiplash every time. Speaking of tonal shifts, Dracula storms into the dining car, which is full of people, and he's half mad with bloodlust. He's hissing like a lunatic, only to be greeted by the soft voice of that sultry little minx, Lord Reuven, who, naturally, proceeds instantly to hit on Dracula. And Claes Bang does a great job, man, because the look on Dracula's face when he turns to receive the flirting is pure 2020 mood, just a hollow-eyed, forced rictus of a smile that stretches far too wide on his sweaty, jaundiced face. So this show is not fucking subtle. It is at an 11 out of 10 the whole time. And I'll say this for the anime comparisons, Dracula in its original form, as I've said before, is anime. The drama is over the top, the characters are straight out of a soap opera, and it's great. And so this extravagant sexual tension and every line being an innuendo about vampirism, I hate to say it, but it's true to form. So the people in the dining car are talking, and we realize that Lord Reuven is on the ship on the advice of his silent benefactor and business partner, Mr. Belauer. Oh my goodness, a mystery is afoot. Let's split up, gang. Dr. Sharma immediately notices and points out that, oh my god, he is sponsored by Belauer. And they realize how weird that is. And they turn to Count Dracula to ask if he knows Belauer, and Dracula is gone. Ah, Van Helsing says in VO, the beast revealed. Shut up, Speedwagon. We know! We know! We just saw it! Steve, I'm not this dumb! Oh my god. This show is Stephen Moffat's anime masterpiece. If I described every scene where Van Helsing goes on and on with painstaking detail, saying in words what we had just seen in action, this video would last longer than... I don't... Well, it would be long, okay? It would be really long. So, Belauer is from the Romanian meaning dragon, as Speedwagon... Van Helsing so helpfully points out. And that's a reference to the book, because Dracula in the book uses the alias Mr. DeVille, because he's a weird idiot and he thinks he's really funny. So Dracul means dragon, and Dracula, son of the dragon. I have heard the word Dracul substituted for devil, and there is some historical validity to that substitution. I cannot vouch for that, but in all of the media that I've read, dragons are, at least especially in medieval literature, semi-satanic. Dragons are aligned in some way with the devil, if not the devil himself. Van Helsing helpfully points out, the purpose of an alias seems to have eluded you. I thought it was clever. Oh, you'll have to be cleverer than that. To feed off of the civilized, you'll have to learn to live with them first. Ha! The boat was dress rehearsal for England. Once again, Stephen thinks that we are dumb as fuck. We understand when this diverse and interesting cast of characters got onto this boat together. I promise you we understood, oh, Dracula is going to eat all of these people, and because of the rules that we have set up, he is going to combine all of their complete skills into himself and become a god. We get it, Steve. You explained the rules in the episode literally titled The Rules of the Beast. You had a whole episode to explain the rules to me. Stop doing it now. I understand. Okay, so Van Helsing then says, you stocked your larder to teach yourself to dine with restraint, and, Mr. Belauer, your restraint was failing you. Literally every line here is a summary of something that we just watched happen. Not one word that Van Helsing says up until about halfway through the episode adds to the plot. It's literally Stephen Moffat coming out from off stage to the narrator's post at House Left and telling you what just happened. It is so fucking brain dead that a stone could understand the proceedings. It's showing and then telling. The very storytelling mechanism feels condescending. At least in JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, when some idiot is screaming the plot at you as it happens, it's because new concepts are being introduced and the narrator is explaining the new concept. However, in Dracula 2020, the narration is pure, unadulterated summary. So then, one of the good things happens again. Remember when Johnny Blue Eyes had a sex dream about Dracula? Well, this time, the sailor with the broken leg has a sex dream about Dorabella, except at the moment of, highest passion. It's a bloody-mouthed Dracula! Surprise! The greatest horror is gay! But again, it's on brand for vampire lore, so I have to give Steven some props. Also, the sailor says, "This isn't real," to which Ghost Dorabella replies, "Reality is overrated." Steven, what the fuck? There is a line in the Mind Palace that I do actually approve of, and it's when Van Helsing says, "You don't drink," and Dracula sneers and replies, "Wine." Because it's straight out of the book, and it's such a good meme that you have to love it. You have to love it. It's great. It's... Uh-oh. Van Helsing is losing the chess game, and she doesn't remember losing so many pieces. Forget about chess, and concentrate on the game. Who is in cabin number 9? Again, Stephen, smug. Way too smug. Because the phrase, forget about the chess and concentrate on the game, is not... It's you telling me that. It's out of character for Dracula. It's... Concentrate on the game? This isn't Sherlock, Stephen, and it doesn't have to be. Van Helsing doesn't remember how she got to the Mind Palace. The last thing she remembers is when she was in the basement with Dracula at the Abbey in Romania. Uh-oh. So, we were on a fine line where the horror was beginning to dawn. She doesn't know how she got there. We don't know what's in cabin number 9. And it's not Dracula, and therefore, by process of elimination... And then Stephen sails right over that line. We were getting there. We were going to figure it out ourselves, and then Stephen fucking shows us. So we established that Dracula can inflict dreams on people with his bite, right? Which we sort of do in reverse, because we see the dreams and then are given the explanation. David Lynch would have skipped the explanation, and then it would add to the sense of horror as you have to figure out that Dracula gives the dreams, but if Dracula's the protagonist, you can't really get away with that. So then we ruin it, because Speedwagon says to Dracula, "I'm in cabin number 9. You did it! You did it! You told me what we have figured out since the beginning of the scene." Another moment of suspense, of genuine, interesting horror, is ruined by the fact that Stephen Moffat thinks that you are dumb as fuck. So Dracula takes everyone into cabin 9, and there are a collection of items taken from each of the murdered victims. He opens a curtain, which, okay, the Demeter is a cargo ship, right? It is said that they've never had many passengers, and none this rich, and that everything is carved wood, and gilt candlesticks, and velvet curtains. Anyway, guess who is laying on a bed behind the curtains? You already know who it is because you watched the last 3 scenes. But it's Van Helsing, and it's framed like it's a surprise. This show does not know what it wants to be. This is a murder mystery arc. I get it. It's fun and exciting. But is this a horror recreation of Dracula? Or is it a murder mystery story? Or is it a Sherlock-style thriller? And I don't posit the Moffat Sherlock as a murder mystery. It's a thriller in mystery garb. Because, to paraphrase Hbomberguy, again, because I have very few original thoughts, Moffat doesn't give you the clues first. He hands you some, and then Sherlock pulls the rest out of his ass. I will say this to Steve-O's credit. He gives you all the clues in the Van Helsing mystery. He does do that, which is why I categorize it as a mystery. So my next question is, why? The Van Helsing subplot is parallel for about 60% of the episode, and then it does join in, and you bet she's crucial later, but this separation, these mind games and this mystery, while they add twists in an otherwise fairly conventional plot, also muddy the water on what the show is trying to be. And I get it. There are 100 million Dracula movies, and maybe, I don't know, don't make Dracula Sherlock, because now Dracula frames Van Helsing for murder. And they're gonna hang her, and Dracula plays the peacemaker between the sailors who want to string up Van Helsing, and Sharma and the captain, who wisely point out that Van Helsing is so sickly that she can barely lift her head, let alone kill strapping sailors. So Van Helsing claims to be a vampire, and that no one can hang her, and explains the rules of vampirism to everybody. And Dracula just kind of stands there and lets her do this because he's in disguise as a normal man. And she explains that she will go mad at the sight of blood, and then they all shy away from her. Standing on a barrel with a noose around her neck, she asks, "Which of you has the courage to kick away the barrel?" And Dracula says, "I do." And so he steps forward and he's going to kick away the barrel, and he asks her, "Shall we end this?" And she doesn't reply, so then he says, "Cat got your tongue?" And then Van Helsing spits blood all over his face, and she says, "Biting my lip." We could see her doing that. It's a visual medium. She was biting her lip. We could see her doing that. This line is given with almost like a Ben Shapiro, "libs destroyed" energy, and it fits because it's dumb as fuck and very obvious and bad. And everyone finally sees that Dracula's a vampire when he loses his mind after having his face covered in blood. So Dracula turns to leave in disgrace after half-assing some excuses, and Sharma's daughter is standing in the way, and he says, "Get out of my way, child!" And he grabs her by the face with his thumb in one cheek and 4 fingies in the other, like, frankly, a lunatic. And this show bears resemblance to JoJo's Bizarre Adventure in that way as well, because people go from pretty normal to comically insane at a second's notice. And while yes, this version of Dracula 2020, is an adept liar, he's in front of literally everyone and trying to prove that he's not the bad man, so naturally he grabs a child by her face. Yes, bloodlust, and yes, Dracula is dumb as fuck in the book, and that's his big weakness, but Jesus, Stephen, can we leave the kids out of this? Oh my god. So, girl child makes the sign of the cross with her fingies, and it works. This is a meme. This is a meme. This has been memed to death. Yamini literally makes a cross out of her index fingers, and it works. So then everybody does it, and they scare away Dracula. So Dracula says, "I made a good detective, don't you think? I had a gift for eliminating suspects." It's Sherlock. It's just Sherlock. It's just Sherlock. This has to be intentional, that he is making Dracula into Sherlock. I'm going to be here forever because every line is weird and bad. So Dracula kicks the barrel out from under Van Helsing and she falls, and Dracula scarpers while everybody's helping Van Helsing. She promptly asks, "Where did he go? Was no one watching?" And Sharma says, "We were helping you." And I'm not going to do Sharma's accent because I'm a white dude. And then Van Helsing says, "Well, next time get your priorities right. There is a vampire on this ship." And once again, acknowledging a dumb trope doesn't make it not dumb, Stephen. So, the hunt for Drac begins, and Van Helsing explains, "Dracula needs to sleep in a coffin or a box containing his own native soil. No idea why, it doesn't make a lot of sense." Stephen, even now, like 3 hours into this miserable show, needs to be smarter than the source material. It's also around here that Van Helsing surreptitiously peels off a fingernail. And that sucker is real loose. It's so loose that it's not even hard to watch her peel it off. It offers no resistance. So, naturally, we know that she has been infected. So, Sharma talks to Lord Rutherford B. Hayes about his experience with the undead, which, again, we already knew. Sharma also reveals that he carries poison on him, just in case. There is death, and there is undeath. And then he looks menacingly at Yamini. Rovan then declares that he'll be joining Dracula, and he becomes Twink Renfield, which I will say I kind of love. Dracula immediately appears after Reuven announces his intention to be evil, with much biting of his lip and rubbing of his neck, I might add. Sharma pulls a cross on Drac, Rutherford whips out a gun on Sharm, and I don't remember if it's introduced or not, and I'm frankly too angry to go back. It's taken me over an hour to get through 12 minutes of this episode because I have to stop and comment on every line like a compulsively mimicking parakeet. So, Rutherford, displaying a spontaneous evil streak a mile wide, tells Sharma, "Drop the cross or I shoot her right in front of you. Surrender yourself to us or I swear I will pull this trigger." Sharma, like a normal person, can't do it, and he lowers the cross. Yamini Sharma, the little badass that she is, just absolutely yeets back the poison vial. There are good elements in here, Steve. Yamini, who is mute, is so smart and clever and well characterized without ever saying a single word that she sees Dracula and goes, "Oh, hell no," and just drinks the poison herself like a god. Yamini is the best, dude. And part of the reason that this series makes me so angry is because Steven does some genuinely good writing here, and he ruins it with all of his fucking nonsense. Sharma, grieving over his daughter's body, rushes toward Rutherford B. Hayes, gets shot, and dies. Then Dracula gives Rutherford suck, and he dies too. Big sad. Pyotr walks in during suck and flees. Again, this wouldn't be a half-bad horror movie if Steve didn't write it. Van Helsing lays down a circle of Bible pages on the deck, straight out of the book, except in the book and the 1992 movie, it's the host. They wait in the circle until nightfall, when Dracula must come for them. We're winding toward a confrontation. The show is approaching its climax at long last, and so am I. Adisa cries for the Garbo Lord Reuven, and the one-handed cook asks why. And you know what?
"Tears for your master. I thought you despised him."
Adisa, wiping away a tear. He wasn't my master. Simple, double-edged, emotionally fraught. With all the venom we know Adisa to have, I'll give this one to you, Steven. It's simple, but sometimes simple works. There is a brief contagion scene where Pyotr comes up to the circle after watching Dracula suck, and he enters the circle before it's complete. Again, great horror themes. Where the fuck was this earlier? Dial up the contagion metaphor. I just slapped my fingers pretty hard on my desk. We're gonna keep going. They make Pyotr step outside the circle to prove that he's not a vampire, because, the circle was broken, a vampire could have entered it. Very suspenseful, very spooky shot of his feet stepping over the line. And then there is just an iconic jump scare of Dracula. One talon raised, he's hissing with fangs, red eyes, and he is just a pillar of shadow with claws and teeth. It's iconic vampire imagery, centuries old. And then Dracula has to say, as Pyotr whimpers in horror and recoils into safety, "That was hilarious." I'm so mad! You can let a show be campy. It's supposed to be campy. You even know how to do it well. That was freaky and classic and interesting. And I swear to God, every line has a dumb pun or a ridiculous trope. We get a conclusion of Adisa's arc. He says that Reuven was the love of his life, which, I get it. It's not as good as the one-liner, actually, because we got that already. But I get you have to build on it because he's obviously about to die, and rule of threes. So Dracula lures him out of the circle because Adisa, as we established, is the prerequisite non-believer. Adisa produces yet another surprise gun. Didn't Chekhov have some rule about these? One that's really good for building narrative tension? So Adisa shoots Dracula 4 times. It fails, surprise, surprise, and Adisa is ruthlessly and bloodily slain. Pyotr rushes Dracula in horrified rage, and Dracula slaps him so hard that this poor kid is thrown about 20 feet through the air and collides with the rum barrel. We remember the rum barrel, don't we, guys? He strikes the barrel with such force that it ruptures, spilling rum everywhere. They punch for a while, and Dracula just pounds everyone. The cook does get a really good linebacker shoulder slam in, and Dracula goes flying, hissing like the Scooby-Doo villain that he is. The cook, whose name is Olgaren, forgive me, I will never remember it, pins Dracula to the deck with knives through his cape. Get it? Because he's a cook? And then Van Helsing lights him on fire because there's rum everywhere, and that's flammable. Dracula, screaming, rips himself free and leaps overboard, which actually, in the book, would have killed him. Because Book Van Helsing does a whole bit about how a vampire cannot survive being immersed in water, which is why traveling by sea is so dangerous for Book Drac. So we get a really fun shot of everyone looking haggard and leaning on the handrail, looking out over the sea. Smash cut! A week later, we're a few hours from England. The voyage continues. The remaining characters are charming. And then Piotr sees a gull that has gotten the suck. Van Helsing peels off another fingernail and tells the captain that her plan is to blow up the ship. They have all the supplies, sulfur, saltpeter, and charcoal, which we introduced in the beginning, Peter! Ah! He did it! He did a writing! He wrote! He did a competently designed story! So this is why this episode should be the only episode. It's self-contained. It's interesting. It has a wide cast of engaging characters and easily has the best horror components in the series because, believe me, it only goes downhill from here. But it is also filled with so much nonsense. And that's why it upsets me. So, Van Helsing wants to blow up the ship to prevent the spread of vampirism to the New World. England is not the New World, and hasn't been since the Roman conquests. So, Van Helsing peels off another fingy, and it pans down, and we see that she's out of fingernails. She has peeled them all off. It's horrific. So, everybody agrees to leave the ship. Everybody's gonna run, including the captain. That's everybody who's left. All the other sailors fucked off a long time ago, and it wasn't important enough to mention. So everybody's gonna leave except Van Helsing, who's gonna blow up the ship. And there's a really tender moment where Sokolov and Van Helsing have this embrace, and Agatha whispers, "I'm a nun." And Sokolov says, "You mentioned." And then she, nuzzles into his neck, sort of his shoulder, his trapezius, and it's really sweet. It's a testament to how powerful a good actor can be with, 3-word lines. It's great. We immediately pan to a scary doll with a fly on it, because again, horror. I don't have a problem with it. It's just horror elements. So Agatha is praying to God for forgiveness for her suicide. Fair. She's a nun, and she hears a strange noise, and she does the damsel in distress thing, where she runs around asking, "Hello? Is anyone there?" Which, okay. So the only other 3 people on the ship have been sent away. They're on the lifeboat. And while it's good to double check, this pragmatic, battle-hardened sister is now flouncing around going, "Hello?" And surprise, it's the captain! He stayed aboard. He's a captain. He's gotta go down with the ship. He offers her a drink and they have a little character building moment. And by sheer chance, she remembers that the room that they happen to be in, that she finds Sokolov in, is Dracula's room. And while sitting on the bed, she says to herself, "A bed of his own earth." And she peels back his mattress, and sure enough, it's grave dirt underneath it. "Sokolov!" Agatha screams. "He's alive!" She turns to the corner to find Sokolov prostrate, bleeding from the neck, and Dracula standing over him. "Sokolov isn't." He leers. It's every line. It's every line. They constantly have to one-up each other, and it's fucking exhausting. So Dracula goes for the drink on deck with Agatha for style points and explains, "I swam under the boat and climbed up on the other side. As escapes go, it's basic but effective." I hate this. So during this inane bullshit, we keep cutting to a bleeding Sokolov crawling toward what we know to be the explosives cache. More seeding and payoff, more chess bullshit. Agatha asks why Dracula fears the cross, and we get this. "Course I do. Everyone does, that's the problem. It's not a symbol of virtue and kindness, it's a mark of horror and oppression. Your idiot church has terrorized the peasant population for centuries, and I have been imbibing the blood of those same persons for so long, I've absorbed their fear of the cross.
My god, I can't wait to eat some atheists.
Agatha says that a lie, and that Dracula is lying to himself, foreshadowing. But is Dracula based? Is Dracula just a little bit woke there? So Dracula realizes that Agatha is clearly trying to distract him and cue giant explosion. So Dracula manages to seal himself up in a coffin aboard the sinking ship, and the sailors on their lifeboat resolve to tell the story like Horatio at the end of Hamlet. And their friends now, that arc has reached its conclusion, fade to black. Or was it? Dracula Kill Bill punches his way out of the underwater coffin and starts swimming toward the surface. I put swimming in quotes because it's not really swimming. He gets to the shore, and the white cliffs of Dover are in the background, and there's a ruined abbey, possibly the infamous Carfax Abbey, and suddenly a spotlight falls on Dracula from a helicopter. Dracula's been underwater for 130 years! It's the modern era! He gets grabbed by the government like he's a fucking BLM protester, and modern Van Helsing is there, and it's the same actress! Welcome to England, Count Dracula. What kept you? We'll start part 3 with JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, Stardust Crusaders.